Hi, today is July 11th, 2025. My name is Victoria Findlay Wolfe, and I am here at the National Quilt Museum in Paducah, Kentucky, in front of my quilt, Mindful Balance. This is another quilt of mine that is in the collection of the National Quilt Museum, which I'm very proud to have that here. It's a quilt quilted by Asher Estrin Hare, and I made this quilt as another one of the projects in my book, Modern Quilt Magic. One of the things I was really focusing on this quilt is showing the complexities of herringbone patterns. There's a difference between a herringbone and a braid quilt, because usually when you're doing a braid, you're sewing them together and you're trimming off the edges to just sew simple rows together. But if you're not trimming off the little triangles, it's how can you piece those together and hang on to that effect that looks really great when you sew it together. It's often a quilt that people just sort of scratch their heads going, how did you put this together? And it's basically put together with partial seams. People like to look at it and they think it's a Y seam where you're sewing and pivoting, but in fact it's a partial seam is a seam that you start, you end, you come back and you finish it. It's a straight line. So when you're constructing a quilt like this, there are no horizontal or vertical seams. Everything is on an angle. And often when we've made these quilts, you see them always vertical. So this time I'm changing the perspective, putting it as a horizontal, and also piecing the rows and adding another element. All of the blocks also included in the pattern itself are also partial seam blocks themselves, and then partial seamed into the herringbone pattern. So it adds that other layer of complexity. What I also love about the museum having both my Soigné quilt and the Mindful Balance quilt is that they're using the same kind of color palettes, but seeing them, especially when they're hanging next to each other, how they can really relate to each other in a color way and balance. It's a mindful balance. How does the color relate? How can you get a balance across the light and the dark values in your quilt and get some really interesting movement? What I also love about this quilt is the negative space that happens. So in this case, even though all of this is the same color, the seams also play an important part of it. So instead of having the color change to show where everything is, the line itself, the seam, is another line in the texture and the movement of the quilt. So that's what I got.